Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
Vince Coglianese.
With all the new crime data that's coming out, that includes the fact that things are awful right now under the Biden-Harris administration. Don't let Kamala and the media lie to you. All right. Now let's talk about the ways in which the Democrats are compromised. We keep getting reports that powerful Democrats are either literally in bed with or figuratively in bed with Chinese spies. What the hell's going on? For the latest on this subject, I want to bring in Phlip Lenczycki, an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller NewsFoundation, who's always digging in on it. Phlip, good to have you with us, sir.
Hi, Vince. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Okay, so what's the latest in the Chinese spies infiltrate one of the major parties of our country story?
Wow, it's a big question. There's so much going on there, unfortunately. But, you know, the big news I think that folks might be aware of is the indictment of Linda's son, who is Governor Hochul of New York's, at this point, former deputy chief of staff.
Yes.
And son was indicted for on a number of counts. But what it boiled down to was, among others, she was forging the governor's name on some documents to help Chinese officials gain visas to the U.S. and whatnot. And she was also doing some other types of double dealing. And behind the scenes, the Department of Justice alleges that Sun is a member of a Chinese government organization. And so that's kind of the thread connecting to the reporting that we did this week.
Yeah.
And so our story was about Representative Grace Meng, and she is a congresswoman for New York's 6th congressional district over there in Queens. And as it turns out, the indictment for Linda's son had stated that she had been associating with some unnamed co-conspirators as well as some associations. And the Wall Street Journal reported that some of these associations were identifiable based on cross-referencing the information within the indictment. And they named one of those organizations as the Henan Association of Eastern America. This is a New York-based Chinese civic association. And our report found that Representative Grace Meng, over there from Queens, she has long been a leader of this Henan Association of Eastern America. In the past, she was the deputy chairwoman and is currently pictured at the top of their website and has been for a long time as their honorary chairwoman. So we've been exploring that, Vince.
Okay, so here's, if I can, I want to go back to Linda's son for a moment and her activities. This is, my understanding is that in Governor Hochul's office, well, for the governor, she was straight up blocking meetings with like Taiwanese officials and really dictating in many ways the agenda of New York State to the benefit of the Communist Party of China?
That is my understanding of the allegations as well, yes. And apparently she was working with an organization called the All China Federation of Returned Overseas Chinese. This is what the Department of Justice calls an agency of a Chinese intelligence service called the United Front Work Department.
Uh-huh.
At some point, Linda Sun had been made an overseas committee member for this All China Federation of Returned Overseas Chinese and was attending events in China and was getting some type of kickbacks by, you might have seen, they had set up some type of importing, exporting business, shipping, I believe, lobsters to China. So there was some type of money transaction going on that for a company that apparently her husband was running, and he was also arrested.
Okay, so in your view, how pervasive is this? You know, it's New York City, you know, it's New York State in this case, Governor Kathy Hochul. And we've had a number of these stories now where, especially it's Democrats, it seems like that's the consistent thing. Maybe there are some Republicans who are compromised too. I wouldn't be shocked by that. whether it's drivers or if it's Fang Fang who's sleeping with Eric Swalwell, whatever it is. How pervasive is this at this moment? Is there a way to tell?
I would say extremely pervasive, and even without being a specialist looking in this every day, we can sort of suss that out just by what all we're catching wind of at this point. But what there appears to be is that there is an issue regarding sort of assistance to those in power. That is one level of apparent infiltration that's going on. And then I think what will come to light soon is that a number of individuals who hold office in New York and elsewhere as well have benefited from these Chinese Communist Party influence networks, that they were supported through fundraisers as well as getting out the vote, and then at some level are now beholden. They might have also at one point or another taken on some type of assistant that is serving the Chinese Communist Party. So I think that that's going to be increasingly understood by the public.
Is there any country on the planet that wields influence the way that China does, including inside of the internal affairs of like American government officials? I mean, one would assume, the United States obviously loves trying to be involved in other countries' affairs, but to have Chinese Communist Party's interests inside of the governor's office, for instance, in New York, or inside of these congressional offices, working to advance that country's goals, I mean, that seems pretty unique.
That's a great question. Honestly, I really don't know. I haven't looked into it, but having looked into the Chinese operations, I would imagine that it's very, very common, unfortunately. Yeah. And were I to look into the Russian or Iranian or some other groups' activity, I'm sure that's occurring as well. Right. The thing we found additionally this week that was the most significant was a video from 2008 of Grace Meng at an event that was welcoming a Chinese Communist Party Central Committee member to New York. And he also happened to be the chairman of this aforementioned group that I mentioned, the All China Federation of Returned Overseas Chinese. And at this event, welcoming this individual to New York, Grace Meng delivered a speech during which she referred to him as our chairman. She said that she was appreciative for him taking care of us, and said that they needed his leadership. And at this event, we also have seen other video that seems to show Linda Sun. And Linda Sun, prior to working for Hochul, she worked for Cuomo, and before that, she worked for Meng during both her 2012 congressional campaign and during her time as a New York Assembly member. So it would make sense that she might have been there, because at this point, this was December 2008, Meng had just won her seat in the New York State Assembly. And the video that we see of her, Linda Sun, at this event is both at the beginning, but then later on, after some speeches have been given, we see Sun apparently standing behind Meng as Meng gets out of her seat to go have a word with this Chairman Lin, this head of this entire agency working for a Chinese intelligence service. Very concerning, and not getting any responses from her camp. We've been contacting them now for months about this and related stories, and they're just totally silent.
And there's this is not like a situation where Congresswoman Meng might be confused about who she was praising. She would know explicitly that this is a Communist Party official.
Absolutely. There was a giant banner hanging behind her that said, welcome to New York, Chairman Lin of the All China Federation of Returned Overseas Chinese. Meng speaks Chinese, and she's surrounded by her staff and other individuals from this association to which she belongs. You'd imagine that someone would have clued her in.
Yeah, you would think. All right, let me move now to the running mate for Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. You've done some reporting on him this week and his proximity to the Chinese Communist Party. What can you tell us?
Well, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Interestingly enough, before we kind of dive into what we broke first, just as a segue, Breitbart actually reported that in 2018, in September, Walz attended a ballet performance at the University of Minnesota that was being sponsored by the All China Federation of Returned Overseas Chinese. So again, we're seeing sort of these same type of operations throughout, the last couple decades. But anyhow, our big reveals this week were that Walz has, on a number of occasions, number one, been meeting with individuals associated with this Overseas Chinese Service Center. I know there's a lot of terms going on, but this is something that appears to be related to the overseas police stations in some way or another. The reason I say that is that individuals from this went to China and met with the Ministry of Public Security, so their FBI. So that was one thing. We found some instances where individuals associated with this Overseas Chinese Service Center held a 2022 fundraiser for Walz, and there were some other instances where they were rubbing shoulders. And Walz then has also recently had a couple other issues. What was the story that you wanted to talk about next, Vince?
It was that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. He just appointed a member of a political faction that pledged loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party to a state board.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, we did like 5 stories this week, so I was trying to know your direction you're going. So anyways, what we found is that he appointed an attorney from Minnesota named Chang Wang to a council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans in 2020 and then again in 2021. And it turns out this individual belongs to another organization connected to the Chinese Communist Party called the China Association for Promoting Democracy. And to your last conversation, any organization that's got the word democracy in it, we know what that actually means, right?
I love that. So that's hilarious. So the communists literally have an organization called China Association for Promoting Democracy. That's one of my favorite things of the day. Right.
And so they have a number of what are called minor political parties. And actually, if you just look them up, a number of them, of course, have the word democracy in them. And they are not real opposition parties. They are controlled opposition, and they serve as advisors. And so what it turns out is that this individual, Chang Wang, who was appointed to this executive branch position there in Minnesota, he's apparently been a member of this, democracy party in China since like 2007, and has been awarded by them for apparently promoting, Xi Jinping thought for a new era with, Chinese socialism characteristics, on and on, right? And we also found that he had submitted apparently a paper to more or less China's Department of Justice that had been accepted, that came with a subsidy. So all types of strange, ties that doesn't take even knowing Chinese to find these. Some of these were on the University of Minnesota website in English.
Everything about Tim Walz, he has sort of a creepy, like, Sinophile thing going on with China. And, for instance, Philip, I know you speak Mandarin. You've been to China a number of times, right?
Yes, sir.
How many times have you been to China?
This is actually an interesting conversation. So, as people have been talking about Walz, I mean, in a lot of ways, I can understand that. I've been going there since maybe 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
And so I haven't been there 30 times, but I think I counted around 20 times. And I'm guilty of buying the Little Red Book and all types of things like that. But it was never for the reasons of admiring the Chinese Communist Party. Rather, it was to, understand, know your enemy type of
No, that makes sense. But the weird behavior of Tim Walz, he's been there, some 30 times. He honeymooned there, right? And he got married. He got married on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square. His claim is so that he could always remember his anniversary, which is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. Like, really? You get married on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square, so you can remember your anniversary? That's demented.
It's very bizarre, and I've been thinking about this a lot. And what's strange about not only his appointment of this individual to this executive branch position, but some of the other things he did while he was a congressman related to the Hormel Institute that have been reported recently, is that, as you point out, he's been there so many times. He was leading trips to China. There are newspaper articles that say, he can speak Chinese. He was on the Congressional Executive Commission on China. And so, he's basically a China expert, right? And that somehow these textbook influence operation, type activities were not caught by him, or that the guy he selected to be more or less his Asian affairs representative in his government, he didn't have a conversation with that gentleman or try to look into his background or get to know him. That to me doesn't pass the smell test.
Have you noticed that Tim Walz has not talked at all about China while he's been on the campaign trail?
Yeah, I imagine that that's going to be very strange in the future when we look back, if he turns out to be vice president and the point man to China.
It's a little bizarre. I mean, if you're an expert on the subject, you think he'd be bragging about the ways to hold China accountable, and they'd be putting him out there. He's the big expert on this subject. No, they're keeping it quiet. I think that's interesting. Phlip Lenczycki, we'll have to have you back again soon from the Daily Caller NewsFoundation. Thank you, sir, as always.
Appreciate you. Thank you. That's
Phlip. All right. And it is now 4:20. How much money are the feds giving to all of these foreign nationals? We'll ask Todd Bensman what he's finding out next. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 4:36. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, joining us at 5:30, John Lott will dig into brand new crime data that's out, showing that things are bad under Biden and Harris, which is exactly what President Trump said earlier this week, and then the media guffawed at. Not true, they screeched. Yeah, we've got the details ahead with John Lott, and you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Getting our arms and minds around the ongoing border crisis is difficult, but it's made a little bit more easy with the fine folks at the Center for Immigration Studies. Joining us now is Todd Bensman. He's a senior national security fellow there and the author of the book Overrun, How Joe Biden Unleashed the Greatest Border Crisis in U.S. History. Todd, good to have you back with us, sir.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I do want to start with Springfield, Ohio, if I can, and in some extension, Aurora, Colorado. But the one that everyone's really focused on is Springfield right now. All of these Haitians who apparently have been paroled into the country, but 20,000 of them dropped on Springfield. What do we know about the logistics of all of that? Because I talked to the Ohio State AG yesterday, and he seemed to be of the opinion that, well, it could be that people are just migrating to Springfield to be with their family members, but he doesn't have clear evidence that the Biden administration manufactured this for Springfield. What do we know?
I'm not very clear about why they ended up in a place like Springfield, Ohio. My guess, and it's strictly a guess, is that there's some sort of work there, maybe a manufacturing plant or some kind of labor type work that people can get.
Yeah.
When you parole into the country, the way they're illegally letting them fly in and cross the land ports from Mexico, they get 2-year work authorization. So they're authorized to work, and it's renewable online, by the way. So, my guess is that there's some sort of an employment center in and around that area.
Mm-hmm. And then to what extent are they granted benefits that you're aware of paid for by taxpayers?
Well, it depends on the state. I mean, they first will get, it depends on the state entirely, but state by state, you can get a range of benefits, anywhere from housing subsidies and, food and, transportation money and really everything. And then there's the federal benefits, which could kick in after a period of time, where they become eligible for things like food stamps and that sort of thing. But, that's the reason that they were given work authorizations is so that wouldn't happen, but it doesn't matter. They get it anyway in a lot of different states.
Yeah. Well, and then so if they're getting housing subsidies, that helps explain why we're hearing from residents on the ground that you have Haitians who are now moving into the limited number of rental homes in Springfield, Ohio, and the costs of those rentals have skyrocketed. Just since September of last year, according to Zillow data, the median rental price is now 44% higher, 44, and it's and dramatically so if you were to pull back 2 years. So we're looking at a lot of displacement.
Yeah, I haven't heard what Ohio's giving, but, Illinois is a good example. Illinois is passing through FEMA money to the tune of somewhere around $9,000 or $7,000 a month. I forget which one per family for housing.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so that's a well-reported number there. And every state's a little bit different. And it depends on what their relationship is with FEMA and how many people are coming. And, obviously Illinois and Chicago is a major center. New York State is as well.
Yeah.
So at the state level, they offer their own benefits, which are often reimbursed in some way, some pass-through way by the feds.
So just to be crystal clear, just to make sure, and I want to move on. You took an important trip recently, and I want to talk to you about that. But $7,000 per family that foreign nationals are receiving from FEMA in Illinois?
Yeah, per month.
What? That's so crazy. That is a very nice mortgage payment, isn't it? $7,000. That's a lot of money.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I would take it too. Oh my goodness. All right, let me move now to your trip. You took a trip to a very important area of the world when it comes to all of this migration to the United States. That's the Darien Gap. Tell us about that.
Right. Well, the Panamanians elected themselves a new president, took office on July 1, and proceeded to hand the United States a golden calf in the form of a willingness and plan to close the Darien Gap. This is absolutely monumental, in my opinion, to U.S. national security and U.S. border security because the Darien Gap passage connects South America with North America through Colombia and Panama. That's where they pass through. It's a few days hike. It's a foot trail, or a bunch of foot trails through there. And, close to 2 million people have poured through that little choke point for the last 3 years. It's including, hundreds of suspected terrorists on the watch list.
And a lot of Chinese nationals too, right?
60,000 Chinese nationals coming through. A great many of them went right through there. I met them down there. And here you have the Panamanians saying, hey, we're willing to close it. All we need is financial help from the Americans who gave it promptly or promised it in an agreement on his inauguration day. Yeah, we're going to give you money for repatriation flights, enough to create a deterrence. And, a little American diplomatic muscle with neighboring Colombia. And lo and behold, here we are, more than 2 months later, and the check didn't show up. And Molino, the new president down there, Jose Raul Molino, is holding press conferences saying, hey, where's the money? We can't do this thing without the money. It's too expensive for us. We needed American support. And what a golden opportunity, right? I mean, to actually close the Darien Gap, but they're not getting it. And so I went down there to see how all of it was going. And that was one of my main findings, which is that, the Americans are kind of welching on this deal. And one of the things they told Molino, and we know this because he held a press conference about it, is that we have decided that we're not going to let any immigrant board a repatriation flight unless it's volunteered. They have to want to get on that plane. Otherwise, forget it. Well, I mean, need I say anything more about that? It's absurd.
They obviously had other intentions. Why would they volunteer to go back? No question.
Right, and as I point out in my my piece at CIS.org, I've got a big formal report up there in the main carousel, CIS.org, is that why would the Biden-Harris administration really authentically want to turn things around down there and help U.S. security when they spent the last 2 years straight rebuilding the Darien Gap into a massive superhighway thoroughfare? They wanted the most people possible to go through there. They have a name for their policy down there. It's called Safe, Orderly, and Humane Passage. They've spent hundreds of millions of U.S. taxpayer dollars on the United Nations organizations down there, UNHCR and IOM, and a whole bunch of NGOs to set up shop all along the Darien Gap to help them all out, to help them all move through. They've shortened it. They've done everything possible. And then all of a sudden, a new president comes in and throws a fly in the ointment or puts some hair in the soup,
Yeah.
So,
well,
that's what's going on. And he's complaining down there.
So when was this? So he just came in
July 1.
July 1. All right. And so his understanding as of July 1 was he was given assurances by the Biden-Harris administration that America would be sending them a bunch of money.
Right. They signed an agreement. They announced it. It's online. I linked to it in the piece at CIS.org. It's all, it's all in black and white. But there were apparently, things left unsaid. For example, it came out afterwards that the Americans were only going to commit $6 million. Well, some of those big planes cost, $500,000 to fly somewhere, to fly people over to India or whatever. And, $6 million isn't going to go very far. And then the other thing was, we're going to offer them protection screening first before we'll let them get on one of those planes, meaning one of those parole programs that we've been talking about, that the Haitians all came in. We authorize them to fly in, or we make them refugees, or we walk them in over the border, whatever. It's like we just don't really want repatriation flights, even though that is the thing that protects U.S. national security. All these terrorists coming through, all these criminal aliens from all over the world, and probably some spies in the mix, and people that we have no idea who they are coming through that gap. That's why this is really. I was surprised that in the debate the other day that Donald Trump didn't mention this. Like, why aren't you ponying up the cash to shut down that gap? I would. Right. I'd give them everything they want.
So let me ask you about let me talk to you about the election year politics of this, since you brought it up, and I've been wondering. Here's a detail that I remember that Secretary of State Tony Blinken went to Mexico last year in December. And met with the Mexican president, and they were coming to some agreement about addressing all of the migration problems. And to this day, my impression is that the United States made some secret offers. The belief is that we were bribing the Mexicans to assist in slowing all of the illegal migration into the United States. And then you give me this story. You're talking about what's happening in Panama and shutting down the Darien Gap. My impression of all of this is that the Biden-Harris administration is twisting some arms, or at least offering some bribes, in order to make the border crisis seem less severe only for the election year, and that it'll be back in full crisis mode should they prevail in November. What do you make of that?
It's absolutely true, 100% true, that when the numbers were out of control, 10,000, 12,000, 14,000 a day coming across, record-setting numbers in December 2023, that all of a sudden President Biden decided to go down there and pay a visit to his counterpart in Mexico City, Lopez Obrador, and within a week, they had 35,000 Mexican troops sweeping the northern cities of every immigrant they could lay their hands on, forcing them onto planes and buses and flying and busing them 1,500 miles south, creating a Gaza Strip all along the southern Mexico-Guatemala border and hemming them in there behind militarized roadblocks. That has been going on since December in my informed opinion, I think, the November 5 election optics to just kind of keep the border calm until then. I also think it's been so effective. I mean, the numbers were down 70, 80% in a week of doing that. Blinken and Mayorkas followed up with a December 27 visit, and a big Mexican delegation followed up on January 19th in Washington, where they cemented the whole thing. And they have been doing these. I've been down there with the Mexican troops, with the Mexican immigration, among all the immigrants running and hiding from them. So I know this is absolutely happening all along the border from Tijuana to Matamoros for 6 months straight now. I don't know what they gave them down there or threatened them. I've looked. I'm looking for unusual expenditures or new $100 million payments, but I can't see anything yet. I don't know where that is. If anybody out there is listening to this, it'd be a great, a great scoop to figure out, what they paid the Mexicans, because they're certainly not, or threatened, they're certainly not saying. But the effectiveness of the Mexican operation gives lie to this idea that they keep saying in the debates that we have to have that Langford Senate bill to do anything. No, they didn't. They just had to have a deal with Mexico, just like Trump did when he was in office. It worked for him too. And it works so well that I think they're not worried about the Panama thing because they know that they're going to probably get hemmed up in Mexico until November 5. And the numbers actually coming through Darien were significantly lower, I believe, partly because they know people know that they're going to get hemmed up in Mexico when they get there. So they're waiting for November 5th. November 6th is the day to watch for on this. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll be watching for it. I know you will. And I'm just annoyed by all the dishonesty and our collapsed border. That's been a huge problem, too. Todd Bensman, thank you very much from the Center for Immigration Studies, sir.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Always great to talk to you. All right. It is 4:51 now.
WMAL, making sense of the headlines because common sense isn't so common. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
All right. Let's go to the phones on line 1. Bristow, Virginia. Is this Diadem?
Hi, yes, it is. It's Freedom.
Hi there. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for taking my call. So I wanted to let you know I was listening to the commentary from your previous guest.
Yes.
And it's no wonder to scratch your head about the funding for subsidized rents. In the summer of 2021, and I know this because I follow the markets for new construction, the real estate markets, as well as stock markets every day. It's part of my job.
Yeah.
And it was alarming that BlackRock and other big Wall Street companies were buying up bundles and bundles and bundles of homes. And I personally couldn't figure out why would BlackRock get into the real estate market. But as it turns out, the information that you revealed today helped me to put those two together.
Yeah, that's a big. So, in other words, government subsidies are flowing towards all of these foreign nationals who are now turning around and renting properties, perhaps owned by big, gigantic, filthy rich firms like BlackRock.
Absolutely. I think it's time to take BlackRock down.
Yeah, there's quite a few people on that mission because they've been misusing all sorts of assets that they don't even own. Actually, it's like other people's money that they keep throwing around in order to make the world a worse place. I don't like that, and it sounds like you don't either. Thanks, Diadem. I appreciate the call. All right, hang on. Joining us in the next hour, John Lott. Also, President Biden just used a phrase he was condemning when it came out of Trump's mouth not that long ago.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.